You'll have to bear with me, my partner says I'm mumbled, so if I'm not totally clear. See, it started already. My name is Bruce Williams, and I've been a friend of Garry since the late 1960s. I met Garry when I worked at the South Winds drag strip in the late 60s, when I worked there, and the friendship started there and continues to this day. But just to review a couple things. First off, thank you all for coming. It's very meaningful to the family, for the support. And there will be a cash bar and snacks will be available after the speeches. So that works. And then following the program, everyone's invited out to the parking lot to mingle among the cars and share their memories out there. So now I'm going to call on Lindsay Oliver and Tanya Stack to come up and say a few words. Ladies.
So I have my emotional support, Tanya, here. Thank you all for coming today and celebrating Garry's life with us. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lindsay. I am Deb Garry's daughter. Some of you know Garry as a friend or a coworker or a car guy. I know him as Dad. Garry became my dad when I was 15 years old, right when I was at the peak of my teenage attitude and sass. And typical of Garry, he was patient, kind, and treated me with respect, even when I'm not sure I always deserved it. Mom and I liked to drive Garry a little bit crazy. We sang songs about chicken pot pie, for those of you that know. Talked incessantly about my dog, and sent pictures constantly to each other with my dog. And he couldn't resist joining in all of this. For anything new he got, whether it was a t-shirt or his Camaro, we would sing, "Papa's got a brand new bag." And for some reason, we would just go into fits of laughter, and Garry would just shake his head and say, "Get in the box." Meaning, get in the box of his truck and stay there. He was done with us. That was one of his favorite sayings. Another one was, whenever I asked him if he needed anything, his answer was always, "An inch of hundreds." Garry had a signature move, and if you saw this, you knew that his hat was coming off, or was going sideways, and his teeth were going out. And that's how he drove us crazy. Every dog in the neighborhood knew Garry as the treat dealer. The garage was always open, and every dog would stop in for treats. He kept treats in his pockets and in his truck, just in case. He fed every animal that showed up. Birds, rabbits, and gophers were just some of the regulars. Garry's love language was acts of service. Even last year, he would phone me in the night on a bad winter weather day and say, "You bus to work in the morning and I'll pick you up." And with that, he would leave earlier, pick up my dog Kevin, and then come and get me. He's helped me move, hang blinds, shelves, looked after all my cars, answered all my random sports and car questions, and drove Mom and I around like passenger princesses. And while he may put up a tough exterior, he really was a softie for family and friends. As I stand here today with family and friends who loved Garry fiercely, I am flooded with emotions and memories that remind me of the incredible man he was. For some of you, he was a lifelong friend, a great mechanic, and a hardworking man who put his whole heart into his shop and racing. To me, he was Garry, an unwavering and loving presence in my life. And I'm so grateful for the years that I had with him and for making our lives better. Thank you.
I'm Tanya, and I'm a good friend of Deb and Garry, and I wrote this poem for Garry on his 75th birthday, so A lot of you know Gary spent a lot of time in his garage, and some of you have been there too, so you'll appreciate the sentiments spoken here. I've revised it a little bit for today's celebration, but here goes. Gary, quite contrary, how does your garage grow? With gas and oil and some turmoil and Hot Wheels all in a row. The cars and pictures in this special place tell a story of a guy who loves to race. He's a racer, a collector, and a great true friend. He will help you out when you need a hand. His garage is full of all kinds of stuff, memorabilia of a serious car buff. If you need a fix, he'll do his best. Gears and rear ends will put him to the test. He can fix and repair, and his price is fair. And if you ever need something, he's got it there. Some is old, and some is new. And this guy's got it, and he'll find it for you. But give him a minute, a beer, and some space, and he'll come up with it eventually. It's no longer a race. Gary's garage is the place to be. Can you smell that now? What must it be? Oil, gas, or maybe brake clean? When you first walk in, you know what I mean. The geezers and knuckleheads are his true pack. They love each other and know how to yak. Endless hours every year were spent telling tales of old and how things went or got bent. Stop in to chat and have a beer. He's always here to lend an ear. Let's raise a glass to our dear friend, a marvelous person right to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Garry was always ready to offer his assistance no matter the circumstances. And I'll give you an example that pertains to me. A long time ago in the late 60s, early 70s, I used to do custom painting. And somehow he sucked me into painting his Chevelle wagon and later on his Nova. At that time, pearlescent paint was brand new to the paint world, so between him and I, we mixed up this concoction and sprayed it on the car. And of course, back then you had to polish it. So while I was polishing on one side of the car, Garry offered to do the other side. He had a huge, powerful buffer with a pad on it. And he started doing the other side. And while I was working there, all of a sudden I hear this, he got the buffing pad stuck between the door jamb and the sill and peeled all the pearlescent paint off the door. So following that, he was banished from the spray booth. And then very recently, we redid the stripes on the front of his Camaro, and I relegated Garry to hold the paper and hand you the tape. That was his level of participation. The other thing is we are going to have some speeches today, and we want to try and minimize that time frame, so I have brought a timer. Don't be offended, but if you hear it, it's a clue. There's been a slight change to the program that you have there. I'm now going to call on Bernie Pfeiffer to say a few words about Garry, and then we will continue on following that. So Bernie, if you'd like to come up, we'd appreciate hearing from you.
Hello everyone, my name is Bernie Pfeiffer. I'd like to thank probably one of the best announcers that SIR has ever had, right here, Bruce Williams. I got a little speech written on, of course, an iPhone. I've gone to the dark side, yes. Okay, I can say that I've probably been at SIR a lot longer than Garry Waldner. My dad owned the land and sold it to Les Howard. So I beat him there. That was 1967, was when the first few cars went down that racetrack in the fall, and the rest is history. I can do this too, because this is only going to take about an hour or so, so let's dig in. Sorry, Dale, just messing with you. I guess he's the guy with the horn. heads, obviously. You've been in his shop, you've had a few beers with him, you've had a cigarette with him, you've raced with him, you've raced against him. Mr. Waldner, in my relationship with him, especially the last 25 years or so, in my mind, Garry was one of the first generations of racers at SIR, which included names like Ox, McCurdy, Boschman, Hess, ZK, and there's so many more, and I'm pretty sure there's a few of you guys still in here. I consider myself second gen, so it's an honor to speak for someone from the first generation of racers. Being an NHRA sanctioned track, SIR was predominantly a class track, competition eliminator, super stock, where the majority of the vehicles that participated at our track, the ET stuff wasn't quite there, but it was a few more years, probably about 15, 20 years, it started to get big. The latter class of super stock is where Garry set his sights on, and where he could compete the majority in the time of his racing career, with the moniker of Magoo emblazoned on the doors. Most of Garry's accomplishments of vehicles, as well as his working resume, have been already seen in a lot of the obituaries, tributes, in the last couple of weeks, so I'll save the pain of rambling on about that. Instead, I'll tell you a couple personal incidences of Wally that have stayed with me for a few years. And I think one of them was kind of let out the bag here a little earlier. One of the SDRA, when the SDRA took over the track in the late 90s, we used to have a little social after every race underneath the tower at the east end of the stairs, if you've ever been there. There was a fire pit, some benches, and of course a few pops, and we discuss bench race of the day's racing or catch up on some gossip. I was with a group chatting when I noticed Waldo looking towards me about, 20 feet away, but something wasn't quite right as I focused, and I saw 3 teeth protruding out of his mouth, and his hat twisted sideways, and his eyes crossed, and I'm looking like, oh man, how many pop have I had here? All of a sudden I look at the guys beside me and say, look at Waldo. They all look at him. Wow, in that instant, he was normal again. Well, somewhat. So that thing has traumatized me ever since I met him. So. I'm sure he pulled that one on a few of you guys here today, and it cracked me up for a couple minutes. But that made the conclusion to me that cat's a pretty cool old dude. But before I could tell anyone else to check this out, it was just that sly grin on his face, and I've got other words that you could call it, but whatever. Another common habit was to walk up to somebody that had smoked, and his right hand out, and that little boyish smile again. My wife and French Law can attest to that. They had to do that a few times. The last few years, Waldo and I made regular Friday dinner dates, if possible, at Delight Nation Buffet in Stonebridge, where we solve the world's problems and talk about drag racing. I'm really going to miss those visits. Garry had just built a cart for my daughter's car in May, and of course, success in the first hit. 1200s, and that's amount in our game is pretty substantial, as well as getting Linus entered into the 10-second zone. If Garry wasn't coming to the track and we raced, he made sure I sent him every ET slip, DA, temperature, wind, the whole 9 yards. And then he'd say, do this, do this, do this. I said, Garry, I'm not touching this thing. You're the only guy touching this thing. And that was right up until he was in Glengarda. I was sending ET slips. And he was after. There's lots more I could yap about here, but I think that's pretty well all, folks. Deb Gord, all who have organized the celebration. You've done an excellent job. All right, B. Wally, Geezer's rule. Say hi to ZK for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Barney. Well said. I would describe Garry as extremely frugal. really selective about his generosity, but when it happened, it was, I'll tell you a little story about that. I was, at the time I was working in the art department at Neon Products, this would be in the early mid-70s. My boss at the time said, I'm going to buy you lunch, it's time, so let's go. So that's fine. And we got out to his car, got in the car, and I said, oh shit, I forgot my wallet. And he said, it's okay, I got mine. So we went to the Ambassador restaurant on East Street. I'm sure a bunch of you people would remember that restaurant. And we had a meal there, and then, when I walked into the restaurant, it was packed. It was packed because it was New York. And at the back wall on the table was Waldo. I forget who he was sitting with, but I could see him when we exited. So we had our meal, it was a good meal. We get to the cash register and stuff, and my buddy, my boss at the time, was like, he said, oh shit, he says, I forgot my wallet. I said, well, mine's in the office. So here we are standing in front of this crowd at the restaurant, fumbling through our pants, trying to find money, and a booming voice from the back of the hall, of the room said, it was Waldo, he says, it's okay, Bruce, I'll buy your lunch. Never forgave him for that. Okay, next I'd like to call on Amy, please, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you for all coming today. My name is Mayor Roger McKay, and I've been a friend with Garry Waldner for quite a while. It's because of him I actually got into drag racing, along with our simpy Ian Mitchell, Mike Winnick from Edmonton, PPD, and Garry. When I was notified that Garry passed, I went to the den. I took out a pen and paper, and I wrote Garry's name on it. And then I put down, my friend. And I was going to write what we've done together, where we've been, why we were friends. And I thought, you're going to hear that same thing again and again and again from everybody here, because everybody here is Garry's friend. He was the most honorable, straightforward, honest man I have met. If I needed help, it was a phone call away. If I needed companionship, other than my family, I go see Garry. I call him. It's time. And our time together is called the captain's meeting. Captain Morgan. Go to the garage. How it became, I have no idea. I ended up with a mug that says Captain Morgan. I'd walk in, if Garry's working on the car, we had a rule. You cannot touch alcohol until the tools are put down. No machinery could be touched if there was alcohol in your hand. But the moment that was done, he'd holler, he's cleaning, he says, pour a drink. And with Gord Spack there a lot of times, he was the beer man, I'd be the captain, and then Garry'd have his shot. We would discuss a lot of things as gearheads. Politics very seldom came up. Garry didn't want to talk about it. And as far as religion go, there was the odd religious context in the fact that you would hear there was a mistake. Oh, damn, God damn this. That was the extent of religion. It wasn't discussed. We talked amongst each other about racing and everything else. Who's going to Edmonton? How are we getting there? And are you going to arrange the trip to Edmonton? Yes, I'll pay you back after we get home. And I said, okay, Garry. I wasn't worried. throughout their racing career together, and I was operating the Saskatoon Police Street Legal Safety Program with the marked police cars. Gary helped us with the Malibu at his shop on Idlewild Drive called Auto Trends. We would pull in there with the marked car. He kind of liked that because it riffraff would kind of look, oh, the cops are here. Stay away. He would take the old heavy Chevy, the picture's on the wall there. He'd put it in his garage and he'd leave the garage door wide open. He wouldn't worry about the riffraff going by because he wanted everybody to see, I have a police car, maybe I have a connection. But as time went, with city yards and Garry helping that marked car, things got stricter. We had other team members that were not associated with the police. Russ, Haramaway, the young driver at the end, Kevin, Ed's son, I just had to do a photograph of their driver's license. One day I get a phone call, who is this other guy with you all the time in the shops that are restricted? I say, Garry Waldner. Some guys knew him. No, that can't happen. He has to come down. We have to identify him, and he's going to have a criminal record check. It's on the table. I told Garry, I said, we've got to go down to the cop shop and get a criminal record check done. Well, Gary's just nervous as hell. Garry, I'll go with you. We go down to the office, give his name, call us in. Are you his sponsor? Yes. Garry answers all the questions. He pulls out more identification, from passport to driver's license to store cards, everything else to prove who he is. The guy just goes through the machine, answers questions, and Garry keeps looking at me. He's nervous. But Garry didn't know what was coming. I said hello. With the ident man. Yeah, criminal record check was done. I knew it was over. Garry didn't. Mr. Waldner come to his office. All these electronics and cameras and tables with screens, and you need your fingerprints. Nowadays, you just put your hand on the screen, done. With Garry, no. The old roll the finger in the ink, on the paper, hand by hand. He finally cleans his hand, and I said, well, you're used to that in the garage, your hands are always dirty, so don't sweat it. The guy says, now we have to go over and take your picture. Garry looks at me and says, is this necessary? I said, yes. He stands there, turn to the right. Mr. Waldner, the other right. You know, he's back and forth, there's flashing, everything else. Finally, we finish up, we go outside, and the ident man says, now we have to go to detention. Garry says, what? Cell block. What for? To see if there's warrants for you. Well, didn't we just check everything? The man is so nervous, he looks at me, what now? And the other guy, the ident guy, and I said, here's your criminal record check. We got you. Well, he smiled, he laughed. He said, you know, you could have given me a heart attack. I said, yeah, but I got you back. We went to the car, I reached in my back seat, and I pulled up one of these. Saskatoon Police Street Legal Safety Program. He got his official shirt to be part of a volunteer group to promote racing at the track, not on the street, exactly like you all know our motto on the back. Once he had that shirt, he went everywhere he could with that marked car. When we went to schools, when we went Dairy Queen on a Friday night, A&W, Grosvenor Park, would you believe it? Grosvenor Park, where the kids hang out. We pull in with that marked car on the trailer, and where's Garry in his shirt? Just with those kids. And before I leave, the one incident that did scare Garry, when he realizing what sometimes the police have to deal with. Here he is, it says, police crest. We're in Grosvenor Park. It's about 8:30, starting to get a little dark. Garry says, man, do I ever smell skunk? Young restaurant where he says, Garry, that's marijuana. And Garry goes, holy mackerel. He says, I'm going to get high. He says, time we leave, I said, "Are you nervous because you got this on your chest?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Welcome to our world, but thank you for coming." I said in the beginning, when I was notified that Garry passed, and I wrote on that paper, "Garry Waldner, my friend." I want to take that line out, "my friend," and I want to put in there instead, "Garry Waldner, our friend."
Thank you very much, Henry. No, Garry was a knucklehead, literally and figuratively. And I'll just briefly give you a little bit of history and explain some of his behavior. The knuckleheads were formed way back in the late 80s, early 90s, after a perilous road trip to California where there were 4 of us. Everything we touched exploded or broke, and was repaired, and it repeated the process till we got home. When we finally got home, Joe Schmidt, one of the original 4 members, conned the name. He said, "You know something, only a bunch of knuckleheads would ever put up with that shit." So that's where it started. And basically the motto of the knuckleheads is morons pursuing impossible dreams. And I think where you can see where that would fit with Garry. And the description of the activities are just irreverent camaraderie. And an example of that would be on Garry's, I believe it was his 65th birthday, we decided to get him a bottle of very expensive scotch. And if you watch the PowerPoint presentation, you'll see the results of that. We went and got a 5-gallon pail from Home Depot. It had to be blue because of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we filled it full of, we put the scotch in, we filled it full of chicken wire, old lumber, nails, and what have you. Put the bottle of scotch in, and then filled it with construction foam and let it harden. And then we glued the lid on. It took him an hour and a half to get into this thing. With encouragement, you'll see him, he's got a knife that he used, grinders, knife, drills, whatever. And he worked hard at it, and he finally got to it. And when he finally did dig it out, of course, we toasted him. So that was that particular incident. So now I'd like to call on Dave Collins to come up and have a few words, please, Dave.
Glad to be there with you. Well, I'm following some pretty tough acts here, so you'll have to bear with me. Left my good glasses at home. Garry Waldner, friend, racer, and all-around good guy. My first acquaintance with Garry was, I think, around 1980. I was new to Saskatoon and the racing scene. Having immigrated from Winnipeg, where the Gimli Dragway was my home track, I was racing a Model T Alter in those days, running in Super Pro. Needed some spark plugs and was introduced to Action Auto on Broadway. That's where I met Garry for the first time. He was working for Vic Albura on the counter. You'll all be bad with him. Garry raced the super stock in those days. We became fast friends immediately for the next 46 years. I must say this is a very hard eulogy to do. I've done a few in the past, and this one here is pretty tough. We had lunch twice a week for decades, shared many moments. I look at a picture above my desk. There are 17 memories that stare back at me each and every day. Garry will be 18. And the hardest to take. We did many things together. The last most memorable was the drag race series we created for SIR's 50th. We call it the Old Geezers Drag Race Series in honor of the creator of the Old Geezers and dear friend, now past, Calvin Polonich. Unfortunately, he was no longer with us to see the result of his Old Geezers creation. We created 2 classes, one for anyone 55 and older, and 1 class for everybody else. We made t-shirts, we made posters, we made decals. We created a cash purse of over $7,000, which we gave to the winning racers. Monies were solicited from local companies, of which Lou Paquette, Saskatoon Truck Center was the largest competitor. Lou's gone too. Garry and I pitted together for years and helped fledgling racers, some of them are in the audience tonight, with their car problems, offering advice. Garry ran his own speed shop called Auto Trends for many years. When he retired, he continued to work doing carburetors, setting up rear ends, building engines. He never stopped working. And there's a lesson to be learned here. When you reach retirement age, find something to keep you busy and active, just like Garry did. We love you, Garry.
Well said, thank you, Dave. Sorry about the finger slip there. I wanted to talk about the car parade at the hospice. It was held in Gary's honor. I believe Lindsay and Gord Spack came up with the idea, then passed the torch to Calvin and Rochelle with the shifters. And the original situation was they wanted to have a few cars pass by the hospice and have Garry out there to acknowledge them. The information I had, we were to be there by 6:30 so we could get everybody in line. And I got there about 6:15, and it was already 3 blocks away, and the cars were everywhere. So there was obviously a change of plans, and they decided that there was just too many vehicles to do a single bypass, so they had to reroute them all through the whole neighborhood, so we wouldn't have messes at intersections and all that other kind of stuff. So that was awesome to get that in. And Tim Lee, I'm going to thank him, he filmed the whole thing. I counted, there's 165 cars paid their respects. The amount of cars that were there, I think, spoke volumes about the respect Garry had with his peers. And just to finish off this little segment, a few of the knuckleheads gathered at a side street just to meet, following. You know who you were. And there was a neighborhood lady walking her dog on the sidewalk there. And she came up to me, I guess, and she said, "Hey, what's going on here?" She said, "The whole neighborhood is paralyzed." And I said, she says, "Is it a car show or something?" I said, "No, it's basically a parade. We're all paying our respects in a drive-by to our friend at the hospice." And she welled up and she said, "Oh my God," she said, "that is so powerful." And Garry still maintained his sense of humor. One quick example was we had the opportunity to visit him on the Friday before he passed. And of course I had to give him a shot. And we talked about the cars and the number of cars that had been in the parade. And I said, "So what did you think?" And he said, "That was amazing." And I said, "Well, the reality is, think of how many cars would have been there had we not paid them all." He quite laughed with that. Anyway, I'd like to call on Ken Ox to say a few words, please, Ken.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate the invite to speak to everybody here. little comment made at the beginning where one of the speakers said he went to the dark side. Technology, I never got there. I'm one of the most technologically inept person in this room, for sure. I still handwrite everything and make all my notes on hand. This is my iPad. The fact that all you folks are here, it just speaks volumes about Garry. Friendships have been discussed throughout here. And all this stuff, the common thread through it, of course, is racing. Excuse me, an SIR. Garry, I knew him, but not really well, because we were all kind of floating around each other at the racetrack, and everybody's busy going in their own direction. But I had a lot of respect for Garry because I knew what he was doing. And we talked, and I think he might have worked for me at one time, but I'm not sure, before he started Auto Trends. One of the things, another friend of ours that's since passed, he would always say, there's no known cure for drag racing. And Garry, for sure, exemplified that. The fact that he won a lot of races and did a lot of things, that was kind of a cherry on the cake. The fact is that it's to do with the people, the camaraderie that he's had with everybody in this room one way or another. He's touched a lot of people, and in so many ways. And for sure, on my end, I'm sad to see Garry go for a lot of reasons, and especially today, because he actually rebuilt my Corvette here, a 63 Corvette, put a motor in it, did the whole thing. I was going to drive it over here, but it stalled out here on the road, and I had a phone for someone to get it. So I want some warranty, Garry. At any rate, there's some comments about Winnipeg, and back in the 60s, 70s, there was a speed shop in Winnipeg called Softies, and a guy there called Brian Buchan, and I would drive to Winnipeg, pick parts up, and come back to Saskatoon. Whenever I was leaving, Brian would always say, happy motoring, and Garry, happy motoring.
Thank you, Ken. Read it? Oh, I can read it. Got a couple of notes from people that asked that weren't able to be here, that have asked to be read. So I'll start with this one. Hello, my name is Nicole Lemieux. Lindsay is my soul sister, and though miles separate us today, my heart is with you in this room. I hope you know that. It's a privilege to share how I saw Garry, a man whose quiet strength and presence shaped a family, and whose spirit continues to walk among us. To me, Garry wasn't just a stepdad, he was a father who stepped in for my friend when she really needed it, and that makes all the difference. When Garry came into Lindsay's life, he didn't just fill a role, he lived it. He chose to be present in ways that mattered most: the rides, the advice, the steady encouragement, and the countless small actions that gave Lindsay the gift of knowing she had someone in her corner. For Deb, he was more than a husband, he was a true partner, walking beside her with strength, loyalty, and love. Together they created a family bound, not only by blood, but by choice and commitment. The power of Garry's presence is something we all carry forward. He showed that being a father is not about a title, but about stepping into the spaces where love is needed and filling them with patient guidance and care. What a gift for my friend. Although we feel the ache of his absence, the presence does not end when the life ends. Garry's presence is still here in memory, in story, in the way his love shaped Lindsay, in the way his partnership blessed Deb, and in the way his steady example ripples through all of us. Though we can no longer see him or hear his voice, we still carry him in our hearts and feel him in spirit. His presence remains not gone, but transformed. Believe me when I say we will meet him again. Garry was also the best grandpa to Kevin, Lindsay's dog. That kind of love, pure and simple, shows the gentleness of his heart. And I believe that Garry will continue to visit, to send little signs and reminders, similar to what we saw at the drag strip ladies, to let them know that he is still with them, walking beside them, just as he always did. We may never see the likes of Garry again, but we long for his presence among us, to see him, to touch him, to hear his voice once more. We are bereft of his presence, his love, his conviction of purpose, and his tireless work ethic. That bereavement has brought us profound grief. It has been said that grief is the emotional price you pay for having known and cared for someone who has departed this life ahead of you. For ourselves, we need to grieve, and to grieve well, not for Garry, but for our own healing, so that as time goes on, we may recover emotionally from this loss and move forward in a way that honors him by continuing to thrive. May our prayers go out now in the weeks and months ahead for his beloved family, Deb, Lindsay, and Gary's extended family. My heart is with you. I love you, my friend. I also have a statement from a fellow racer, Bob Wojtowski. Bob was unable to make it, and he lives in Hawaii, and it's a pretty tough choice. To make the statement Garry was a fun guy would be a huge understatement. He was one of those rare, unique individuals who always enjoyed being around, soft-spoken, kind, and had that infectious laughter and grin. Waldo was always willing to help or offer advice to all who asked. His love of drag racing and performance vehicles, coupled with his considerable mechanical abilities and knowledge, earned him great respect and success in the racing and collector car communities. I was happy to have known him from the late 60s and raced against him in Southlands in the 70s. While I am sad to see you go, I will cherish our memories for the rest of my days. In that long-distance conversation with Bob, telling me about this, I had told him that the Knuckleheads were building an urn for Garry, and we were getting the contents ready to go in. Bob's comment was, wow, someone finally was able to contain Garry. Okay, and also Garry Lindbergh, who was unable to be here today, asked me to express his condolences and best wishes for Dad and the family. I'm going to give a few special thanks, and then we'll do some, we will have an open mic session. If anybody wants to say a few words. First, I'd like to thank Gord and Tanya Spack. They've been huge support to the family, Lindsay and Deb. And Tim Lee, of course, and Al Barrow for aiding with a lot of the pictures and stuff that we put up. Also, I know I'm going to miss somebody, so I'm going to say it. I'm going to thank them anyway. And Garry knows who you are and who you thank. So thank the 567 Club for helping the parking arrangements today, and the Knuckleheads Construction Company for the fabrication of Gary's urn. And also I'd like to thank the Delmany Funeral Home for how professionally they've managed and handled this whole procedure. It's been truly appreciated. Okay, is there anybody who would like to say a few words? Oh, it's a race. Oh, okay. Let's start now.
I'm Lori Bradley. I grew up with Sharon and Les hired the group of Bruce, the best announcer the best announcer in SIR, Bernie, I got bad news for you. Every time we had breakfast in the late 60s before the races, there was Donnie Beck and Venables and me, and we all flipped a coin to see who was going to handle the mic. He always had a double-headed coin. He handled the damn mic. So eventually, we thought it wasn't worth fighting. But that's why he's got the horn, yes. One little story. Gary's daughter mentioned about the pile of hundreds. So a year ago, I phoned him and I said, Gary, I said, I bought an old barn find, 1975 Ford, 1-ton, 394 barrel, 4-speed with power steering, grain box and hoist, hasn't run for 25 years. Can you do the carburetor? Because my mechanic took one look at it and just laughed at me. And I said, never mind, I got a guy. So he says, all right, I know what it is. It's a 600 CFM Holly, whatever. I'll order the carb kit, I'll charge it to your account. He says, I need 300 cash. So when you said count them in hundreds, I know exactly what you're talking about. Lori, I'll do the carb. The carb kit you're paying for, and bring 300. So I did. I did a wonderful job. Anyway, you think of all the names and the people that are up here, and ZK, Norm Hess, Mike Evans, Randy Swain, Vic Calabura, Larry, Eric Johnson, all those people we remember because we were there in the 60s and 70s. And Les, holy shit, he'd buy rain insurance because he was tighter than the cut cow, because God, if it rained, all hell was breaking loose and he was going broke. Well, that all ran into me and all the rest of us, but we all had a hell of a time. I think I worked for him for 10 or 15 years. So, for the group here, thank you for coming. Gary deserved it. Ken Ox said it all. He said he touched a lot of people. Yes, he did. Gary was special. I'm glad I was just a small bit of his life. Thank you.
Well, I didn't write a speech, so I'm going to fumble a little bit. But Deb, Lindsay, I don't know you guys that well. I know my drag racing family. I met Deb at TCU with my wife. I go to concerts. I wear my SIR jacket. Do you know Garry Waldner? No, I don't. I'm not going to admit it, am I? No, I haven't. I'll tell you what. I met you. But that's what we do. We drag race. We have our drag racing family. When Dad and Lindsay are going through this stuff, everyone's offering, but you guys were well taken care of. Garry was well loved. The best thing I could say was, I kind of panicked. I had words about a lot of races, a lot of people. Garry was my go-to guy. If I had a question about SIR, you learn. Everyone has their own story. Go talk to Garry. Let's see what the real story is. He helped me out tremendously. But the biggest blurb I had, and I kind of started panicking because I didn't know what I was going to say. And thank you, Gord, for forwarding all that information. Back, I think it was his 45th year anniversary. That was like close to 15 years ago. Next year, 60 years at SIR, and I wish Garry would be there. But he's gonna be there. His spirit's gonna be there, right? But the biggest thing he told me, and I get off on this one, and this was, like I say, back at the 45th anniversary at SIR, he said, Mike, I could have went to Vancouver and back a quarter mile of the time with all the passes I made in my lifetime, and that was 15, 16 years ago. And he was racing after that again. So, thank you so much. I'm not going to forget this guy. You can't. His spirit is out there. We've missed it. We've lost it, you guys. Dave, you talked about Kelvin Polonich, my last week in racing out Yorkton with him. I got memories. Memories are what is going to carry us through this, and we can't forget who got us here. Ken, I apologize. I didn't know you were at SIR this week, and I knew you probably were, but it was a little busy day at the office, if you understand, right? But if I'd known you were there, I would have definitely mentioned your name out loud. I seen you with the Joker and Andy Boschman. So I mean, Andy Boschman, boy, we got a lot of history. Western Canada, Canox, man, us Canadians, we kicked ass. Western Canada kicked ass. SIR kicked ass. So Garry Waldner kicked ass. All I'd say is, you know what? You feel sad? Look at the program. Garry had that glint in his eye and that smile. That is Garry Waldner, Mr. Magoo Waldner. Thank you.
Anyone else like to say a few words? Cowards. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up because the most important part of today's event is the get together outside with the cars and the friends and discuss the memories, the great memories that Garry has provided us. So, that being said, a little explanation about this horn. In addition to being a timing device, and I mentioned before, Garry was frugal, to say the least. So we submitted a budget for a brass band to play here today, and he vetoed it. So this is what we've ended up with. So I made a little label here, and it says the Knuckleheads Sympathy Orchestra horn section. So that's it. So if you can just stand, please. And we'll send Garry off. Thank you. Bruce Williams here. There's one thing I wanted to add to today's celebration of life for Garry Waldner. You're all familiar with the games of Where's Waldo? Well, Waldo's been found, and the big guy has him, and he's in good hands. Thank you.